Welcome everyone. I'm Councilmember Zach Hall, and I'm calling the April 1st, 2025 City Council Planning, Development, and Environment Committee to order at 6:32 p.m. I'm joined by Council President Walsh, and Councilmember Jang has an excused absence this evening. Quickly to run through the agenda, we'll take public comment. We'll do approval of the last month's minutes. We have COM 0103, the Middle Housing Draft Regulations, and COM 0104, Title 18 clarifying amendments. So the first item on our agenda is public comment. A few remarks before we get into public comment. There are multiple times to give public comment tonight. This general public comment opportunity now, or you can wait to make comments after the presentation and council question and answer period of each of our two items. If you're signed up in advance, we'll call you first. And if you're joining us virtually and like to make comments, please raise your virtual hand. If you're on your phone, press *3. If you're on a smartphone or your computer, look for the raise hand icon. And if you're in the room and didn't sign up, we'll come to you after we get through the people who've signed up. Let's just take a quick moment for me to check in with the clerk and see if there's anyone online who would be interested in speaking.
We have no virtual attendees so far.
Okay, no virtual attendees. And do we have anyone who signed up to speak for public comment?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, perfect. A few more comments then. Thank you very much for being with us. Public comments are an important part of the process. We take them seriously and factor them into our decisions. You're now invited to address the committee regarding matters directly related to city programs, projects, services, and events. But just keep in mind that anything related to political campaigns aren't permitted. If you'd like to comment, you'll have an opportunity to do so. Please direct your comments to us, the committee, not individual members. And again, while this isn't a question and answer session, if you have questions, we'll kind of keep track of those, and we'll be sure to follow up as needed. When you're recognized, unmute your microphone if you're online, but there's no one online yet, or step up to the lectern here, state your name, address, and relationship to the city, speak clearly and pause frequently, and limit your comments to 5 minutes. If you're attending, this doesn't quite apply right now, but if you're attending virtually and we're having trouble hearing you, we're going to have to move on, but we encourage you to try to rejoin the meeting. And if not, of course, you can email us anytime at citycouncil@issaquah.gov. Last but not least, personal attacks, obscene language, derogatory remarks, and disruptive behaviors such as shouting, booing, clapping, or stomping feet, I'm not imagining that's going to be a problem, are not permitted. So again, thank you very much for being here, and I'll go over to the clerk and ask for who'd like to speak first.
Chair, first signed up to speak is Ann Fletcher.
Great, come on up, Ann.
Great. Good evening. I'm Ann Fletcher. I'm a 38-year Old Town resident and a People for Climate Action member. Last week, my husband and I received 2 letters. I meant to bring them to wave them around, but I forgot. One was handwritten even, and they were from local real estate agents with ready investors and desirable terms to buy our home. We have received similar inquiries in the past, but both of these letters specifically mentioned the code changes that you are discussing tonight. Developers are more than ready to help densify Old Town, possibly at the expense of families who have been and would like to move in to the more moderate homes with good yards here that are still affordable to them. So let's let the families also have a chance to invest in their units. Developers can competitively raise the prices and outbid these families because they can make a good profit if they're allowed to build more units with fewer requirements. Smaller, older homes will be demolished to put in 4 units a lot, and among other things, this isn't environmentally sound. The rapid gentrification could be at the expense of a more measured approach, where owners, including young families, can use the new and improved city regulations to remodel, duplex, add ADUs, etc., to what is already here. We'd like to see that approach continued as much as possible. Middle housing is supposed to be to the same scale of existing housing. and allowing 4 units without exception or mitigation will not accomplish that. The PCC has done a good job of listening to the input and considering the complexities, and many of their recommendations would help increase the density while retaining the character and the human health of Old Town. These include 2 units versus 4 per lot, making ADUs easier for owners to build, allowing 2 ADUs with another unit or duplex, setting ADU minimum of 1,000 square feet, massing and facades similar to single-unit homes, and retaining open space of 20% when more units are on a lot. Other less beneficial PPC recommendations were made because of state law that overrides local control. And for example, the community and even some of our leaders did not realize when these laws were passed that the definition of 1/4 mile from a transit station included bus stops. This means pretty much all of Old Town and much of Squaw Mountain have to allow 4 units per lot. Current land use and design codes might make 4 units unworkable on smaller lots, but there is some uncertainty. Would the city codes override those 4 units, even if a home was within 1/4 mile of a bus stop? So I support the administration's pursuit to clarify and address the transit station definition. Similarly, the new law for no parking minimums within 1/2 mile of transit stations is problematic because it basically covers the whole neighborhood and more. Our streets don't have the capacity for an influx of residential cars. We already have weekday traffic jams in Old Town because of pass-through commuters and the 3 nearby schools where parents and students drive to and from school every day rather than using the school and public transportation, the buses. This makes it difficult sometimes for residents even to get in and out of their driveways. And finally, the EV charging requirement for multifamily units is based on an old 2021 ordinance that was approved by the city and also an inadequate state law approved a couple of years ago. By 2030, many car manufacturers will sell mostly EVs, and our buildings will not be adequate for that. Adding EV capability later is expensive and inefficient. The city needs to update this EV charging ordinance as soon as they know what the state legislature does this session. And I think we should also add more bike parking than 1 per 20 units to encourage multimodal transit and travel. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Ann. Who's next, clerk?
Chair, next up is David Kapler.
Good evening, David Kapler, 255 Southeast Andrews Street. I have to agree with what Ann Fletcher said in total, and just wanted to bring up one issue that's going to lead, I think, to confusion, more confusion than we're already having around this issue. There's at the corner of 2nd and East Sunset, there's under construction now a 4-unit building. And it's starting to, they're in the construction stage of the 2nd floor. It's going to have a 3rd floor. I'm afraid people in my neighborhood that are on the other streets besides East Sunset are going to see that and panic and think of these kinds of buildings are going to be right in their neighborhood. And I think it's really important to clarify for people that there's a different zoning for the sides of the street on East Sunset. This property went through a process and hearings and the whole bit to do the 4 units at that site. But just for everybody's peace of mind and the quality of the discussion and everything being on the right piece of property or the right area, and it would sure be good to make sure that's clarified to people that are going to see that 3rd floor and see that it's got 4 front doors, and you're going to hear about it potentially. So let's just handle that correctly and upfront, and it'll help a lot on this whole discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
Next, we have Nancy Davidson.
Okay. Nancy's going to hold off until after the presentation.
And Chair, that's the last of those that signed up before the meeting.
Okay, great. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to make comments now, knowing we have public comment opportunities after the presentation and council question and answer? Yes, I'm seeing one. Connie, coming up.
Okay, Connie Marsh on Squawk. And as I watch potential code changes come through, I keep wondering where the whiteboard is, or that from the council retreat right after the code was created. And every time I ask for it, it appears for a second and then it's never cross-referenced in all of the changes and sort of marked off as to how we're progressing on that. So is that a thing? Is it ensconced somewhere that we're supposed to be actually using it? Was it ever adopted as a resolution by council? Or is this just a memory that I should let waft away because it's not enforceable? Because if we're gonna do what you said, then we need to make it rigorous, I guess would be the word. And we need to make it visible to the public that those are the goals that we want, yet they are nowhere. And so how do we get somewhere if we can never see what success is? And that's part of the problem with many things in the city, but here's just one easy one. I don't know. Does anybody know what it is? Anyway, there you go. I'll talk later again, maybe.
Thanks, Connie. Would anyone else like to make public comments now at the start of the meeting before we dig into the content of the meeting? And is there anyone online who'd like to make public comment?
Chair Hall, we still have no virtual attendees.
Okay. Last chance to make public comment now. Not seeing anyone, so we will then move on to the next part of our agenda, which is approval of minutes. So the March 4th meeting minutes were distributed in advance. Any corrections by the committee? Any objection to approval by unanimous consent? All right, great. Then hearing none, the March 4th, 2025 meeting minutes are approved as presented. The next item on our agenda then is COM 0103, Middle Housing Draft Regulations, and we have Associate Planner Valerie Porter here to guide us through all that good work. So take it away, Valerie, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Valerie Porter, Associate Planner with the Community Planning and Development Department, here to talk to you about the Middle Housing Regulations. So tonight, the administration is asking the committee to deliberate and make a recommendation to the full council regarding the Middle Housing Regulations. So first, I want to start with the project goal. So the first goal of this project is to amend the land use code to comply with House Bill 1110, which discusses middle housing. The second the other bill is House Bill 1337 that addresses accessory dwelling units. And then the second goal is to propose amendments that meet the intent of the bill. And
yeah, just a second. Can we get the size of the PowerPoint just a little bit larger? Thank you.
And the second goal is to meet the intent of the bill and facilitate housing, as well as propose amendments that allow this housing to fit seamlessly within the existing neighborhoods. So I briefly want to talk about public engagement. So since July, staff has been working to inform the public about this project. In July, we went live with the Middle Housing website, where we posted project information. We had a definition on what is middle housing. We posted our feasibility report as well as the project timeline. In August, we held a middle housing workshop to try to gain feedback from the community. We also created a online survey that went live in September. We believe that we got pretty good feedback, received approximately 280 participants. And then we also, staff held an online Q&A session in October. And we've also held middle housing tours with PPC and council to try to gain some feedback. So since October of 2024, the administration has been posing questions to PPC and PD to help guide the proposed amendments. So the next two slides, I'm going to summarize the questions that were asked to PPC and then their decisions. House Bill 1110 requires middle housing projects to be streamlined and only be reviewed administratively. The administration believes in order to comply with this requirement, a unit limit needed to be established for middle housing. PPC felt the unit limit should be set at 4 units or less, and anything more would then need to be, would be considered impactful and need to have neighbor notices or be reviewed by the Development Commission. House Bill 1110 states that middle housing regulations cannot be more restricted than those for detached single-family homes. And so this required detached single-family homes and middle housing to be treated the same, which required understanding if the city also wanted to exempt middle housing when it came to the land use review process or frontage improvements. PPC decided that the middle housing projects would only be required to receive a building permit, and those projects would also be exempt from constructing frontage improvements if constructed on an existing lot. And so mainly so that single families would not be impacted or required to do additional permitting than they currently have to do. And also, just to be clear, projects utilizing the unit lot subdivision, so again, have a lot constructing a middle housing building type, but they want to create 0 lot lines. If they were to utilize the unit lot subdivision process, they would be required to construct frontage improvements. And those improvements could be matching what's existing or constructing half-street improvements, which would include sidewalk, curb gutter, sidewalk, and that's just dependent on the location of the lot. The proposed amendments that have been presented to you do not mention frontage improvements because these requirements are outlined in the street standards, which is regulated by or managed by the Public Works Department, but CPD staff is working with Public Works to ensure that the discussions that we have related to frontage improvement are reflected in the street standards. A detached single-family home and an ADU are not considered middle housing building types. However, House Bill 1110 does allow a city to decide if an ADU can be constructed on the same lot as a middle housing type and whether or not it could be counted towards lot density. PPC was asked, how would we like to treat ADUs because of this? And they believe ADUs should be allowed on a lot with middle housing and count towards lot density, as ADUs is considered an affordable housing option. We also posed a question related to critical areas. With House Bill 1110, the city had the option to exempt lots encumbered by critical areas from building middle housing. Again, a question was posed and PPC decided that the critical area code should be applied currently how it is applied today, and this is really specifically towards those lots that are encumbered by coal mine or seismic hazmat areas. We would allow them to build middle housing just as long as they're able to mitigate the impacts per the land use code. And we also posed a question related to impact fees. The administration, with these new regulations, staff wanted to understand if impact fees should continue to be waived. We posed a question and PPC agreed the fees should be waived to continue to encourage the creation of accessory dwelling units. During the January PDE meeting, the committee requested information about lot density be presented to PPC to for them to further discuss and provide a recommendation. PPC decided to keep the lot density at 2 units per lot, as this allowed the city to comply with state regulations, allow for more density, but then allow them to evaluate the progress over time and then make changes if need be later. PD also wanted PPC to discuss the size requirement for accessory dwelling units. Considering how the state is blurring the lines between a primary unit and the ADU, PPC decided to keep that size requirement at 1,000 square feet because they felt that that size requirement was appropriate for an accessory structure. But as the project progressed, the policy questions, the administration started to pose questions related to design to PPC. The administration wanted to understand if the requirements to have a walkway separate from the driveway should remain. PPC decided this requirement should be reviewed as it would allow the developer a little bit more flexibility, and also considering that impervious surface requirement. The intent of House Bill 1110 is to allow more housing options in single-family zones. So since new building types are being introduced into single-family zones, the administration wanted to understand if design standards should be in place, and they suggested two requirements that are currently applied only to Old Town if they should be applied citywide. PPC agreed that having design standards in place was needed, and the two requirements were appropriate. It allowed for to kind of create visual interest and to allow these new building types to fit with the existing homes. So a few years ago, the city added cottage and courtyard housing to the land use code, but we didn't adopt any design standards. So as part of this project, we also created design standards, creating, the open space and what those open space requirements would be. The administration's latest proposal was to require at least 20% of the lot to be set aside for open space, and PPC agreed with this proposal. So next, I'm going to briefly go over the major changes that occurred with the land use code. And so the city changed lot density requirements to align with House Bill 1110, which required allowing to increase lot density to 2 dwelling units per lot for all lots zoned residential, and then also allow 4 dwelling units on 1 lot if 1 unit was designated as an affordable unit, or 1 unit was, or if the lot was in quarter-mile walking distance of a major transit stop. The state introduced this new term of major transit stop with House Bill 1110. The Department of Commerce has interpreted this definition to extend to sound transit bus stop or bus routes. So here is a map showing all of the major transit stop locations throughout the city. The blue dots, they're little tiny dots, but they're showing the bus locations. And the lighter blue area around that is the quarter-mile walking distance from those stops. And the darker area around is the half-mile walking distance from those stops. And then if you can kind of see, it's a little bit hard because there's a lot going on this map, but there's some green shapes, and those are highlighting the lots that would be impacted by any of the major transit stop requirements. So as you can see from this map, there are some neighborhoods that would be greatly impacted by this requirement. I'd like to, again, state that the administration does not agree with the Department of Commerce interpretation, and staff has been working with our state representative during this legislation session to amend this definition. Unfortunately, we'll not know when this definition will change. We're hoping around the June time, but we're hopeful that it will be changed.
So real quick, there is a bill, is that what you're referencing, going through the legislature right now to clarify the language, is that right?
I believe so, yes.
That's correct.
Okay, do you happen to know the bill number off the top of your head?
1491, I believe. It's the TOD bill that has a definition for a major transit stop already. It's part of the bill.
Okay, thank you.
So as previously mentioned, accessory dwelling units are allowed to be constructed on the same lots with middle housing, and they will count towards lot density. That was discussed, and that change is being reflected in the proposed amendments. The state legislation requires that the city allow 6 of the middle housing building types in all single-family zones. And so the table of permitted uses has been revised to allow for duplex, triplex, fourplexes, townhomes, and cottage homes in all single-family zones. Again, we added the term middle housing, which again reflects the PPC's recommendation of 4 units. And then we also revised the permitting process, again, based off of previous discussions, to exempt middle housing projects from a land use permit. We also established design standards for single-family and middle housing building types, just again to ensure that these new types fit seamlessly in these neighborhoods. And then we revised the parking code to align with state legislation. And PPC did recommend increasing the maximum parking requirement for detached single-family lots from, I believe, 2 to 4. And this is to allow for those lots who have a garage and a long driveway that would accommodate parking. So instead of us restricting it, they're allowing for that option. And then we also, again, revised our open space requirements. Again, in addition to addressing House Bill 1110, we're addressing House Bill 1337. The land use code was revised to allow 2 ADUs on one lot if it's constructed with a detached single-family home. We also removed all language requiring a property owner to reside on site. And prior to the code update in 2023, there was code language allowing someone to create an ADU if the size of their basement or their attic was over 1,000 square feet. This requirement was removed, but we're proposing to put this back in because we believe it's appropriate if someone wants to, again, convert their basement just to an ADU and not have to do additional modifications to meet code requirements. And then we also eliminated some processes that are no longer used. The code, there was a requirement specifically to eliminate approved ADUs. There was a bunch of steps that just weren't necessary, so we felt that it was appropriate to clean that up and remove those requirements. During the January PDE meeting, the committee requested analysis around affordable housing requirements. Really, you wanted to understand, I believe, would these requirements actually yield an affordable unit on site? Staff worked with the Regional Coalition of Housing, and they developed a pro forma model. The study evaluated Issaquah's housing prices, land values, estimated construction costs, and potential profit for a variety of scenarios. State legislation requires an affordable unit to be sold to households making less than 80% of the area median income, which this information is based off of. So here's the model. It's showing 4 scenarios. The first is a duplex, a new duplex. The second is a cottage development with 4 units. The third is a townhome project with 4 units. All of these would then be constructed on a 10,000 square foot lot. And then the last scenario is an existing home that's being converted into 2 units, and that would be on a 5,000 square foot lot. The highlighted section, or the area highlighted in red, is the development program, and this is just listing, the number of units, the lot size, and so on. The feasibility analysis section, which is highlighted here, is showing the development cost and the project profit. So according to this data, a new duplex on a 10,000 square foot lot would not yield a profit and is unlikely to be constructed.
Real quick, can we enlarge the PowerPoint even more just for this bit? For any members of the public that wanted to. A little better, yeah, okay, thanks.
So this last section is showing information related to the affordable units. This information I'd like to bring your attention is the last line, which basically shows an affordable unit being constructed for cottage and townhome projects. These projects could create an affordable unit if the affordable unit is smaller than the market rate unit. And in this scenario, it's showing a unit smaller, at least 37% smaller than the market rate units. So this is determined by comparing the residual profit, which is right up here, with the difference per unit line. Basically, the profit has to be greater than the difference in the units. So there are two key takeaways. The first is it's likely that an affordable unit can be constructed on site if the unit is smaller than the market rate unit. And then the second is constructing more units on a larger lot is more profitable. Currently, the land use code allows for units to be smaller than 10%, but the code doesn't address a 4-bedroom scenario, which is what this pro forma model is discussing. And so based off this information, the administration is proposing to add a 4-unit requirement to the code, just in case that someone's able to produce a 4-unit or 4-bedroom affordable unit, there is an option for them to create it. PPC held a public hearing on March 27th and unanimously approved the proposed amendments, but with one motion to revise a requirement in the single-family and middle housing design guidelines. This change was intended to ensure that primary access is gained from the street first, and then if any other available access, or if there was no other primary street to gain access from, they would then gain access from an alley or another transportation facility. So again, the administration is asking the committee to deliver.
Real quick, just go back to that last slide and take a question, and then let's go over to action needed. Sorry, I know you're almost done there.
Almost there. I remember when we went on the housing tour, there was an ADU above a garage that had the door out the side and it had a sidewalk that led in. Would that be allowed under this scenario, or would that not be allowed because it isn't facing either the street or an alley?
So ADU standards wouldn't, we wouldn't apply this standard to ADUs. They would have to follow the ADU code. And so I believe we took out all requirements for regulating door locations for ADUs just to encourage their creation.
So would it apply to cottage or cluster housing, or just the like townhouse duplex?
It would apply to, so this scenario is specifically addressing more like townhomes. So if the home is set back from the main street, then they would then be allowed to be directed towards a transportation facility.
Okay.
And that
Or a central open space or central courtyard in the case of cottage
Right.
or something like that.
or a
Yeah.
trail. So
Okay, thank you.
Good question. All right, feel free to wrap up. Thanks.
the administration is asking the committee to deliberate and make a full recommendation to the full council regarding the middle housing regulations. Any questions?
Okay, I've emailed over a few of these, but I just wanted to make sure we had them as information in case anybody's watching this. So the open space requirement, one of my concerns there was, is that on top of the impervious surface, or could it be included in that? So can you explain the differences between open space and impervious surface?
Yes. So the impervious surface requirement is a zoning requirement. And so basically each zone has a specific percentage. And so the purpose of that is just to ensure that there's balance between impervious surface versus pervious surface. The open space requirement is specifically for cottage and courtyard housing. And someone could have open space that count towards pervious as well as their open space requirement. And again, the open space requirement related to cottage and courthouse is one estate requirement. We're required to allow, or for cottages, they were required to allow at least 20% of the site be allotted to open space. And also, that's just kind of the character of cottage homes, is that they gain access from this open space.
So I think you had clarified during the presentation the difference between the major transit stop, quarter-mile and a half-a-mile. I know that's very difficult to see on the screen, and it, looks like it's covered, but I appreciate you doing that. And then the reduction in the on-site affordable unit in that pro forma. Can you talk about what's in the code? Because I believe you said the code says 10%. It can be 10% smaller than a market rate unit. And otherwise you have to ask staff for an exception. But you've also mentioned these different sizes for different number of bedrooms. So can you tell me what's in the code, what's not in the code, how somebody would reading it if they didn't know the information?
Yes, so right now what I'm showing is the current code language, the code language that's currently in the code, and then the red text is the administration's proposal to revise this. And so basically what this is saying is that if you have an affordable unit, we would prefer that it's 10% less than the market rate, but you can go lower if you get the CPD director's approval, but in no case can those affordable units be smaller than the sizes outlined here. So that would be 500 square feet for a studio, 600 square feet for a 1-bedroom unit, 800 square feet for a 2-bedroom unit, and 1,000 square feet for a 3-bedroom unit. Again, the proforma was discussing a 4-bedroom unit, which the code didn't discuss, and so we're proposing to have a 4-bedroom requirement.
Great, that answers all of my questions, yep.
I don't have any clarifying questions for this, though I did just want to say, because it was brought up in public comment. So the Title 18 whiteboard is something that exists, right? It's been published several times in packets and stuff like that. We did have a lengthy conversation during budget. This is all a question just to say, is this the right assumption? We had a lengthy conversation during budget whether or not we could pull things from the whiteboard into our work plan, and the answer was we actually kind of already have a stacked work plan for planning and community development right now, and so we're not able to do that. And so council gave the thumbs up that we would be going into the biennium not affording to be able to work on anything on the Title 18 whiteboard. Is that right? I think
That
that's
is
what-
correct.
Okay.
So we are maintaining a list. It is on the city's webpage. Because of the workload with the state mandates, middle housing, House Bill 5290, and another busy legislative session this year, those are the, were not anticipated when we were creating the future updates list. But council did prioritize parking and housing from that list, and parking has been part of these bills. We have some issues to resolve on the parking with a code update already that were passed by state legislature. There's some new bills floating around, so we'll know more after the end of the legislative session, but we will be taking on some parking amendments to meet the state mandated requirements. For housing, we've already done the Pioneer program that established the multifamily tax exemption, so we want to see how that works out for the city before we take on of expanding multifamily tax exemption for the entire city. But that's where we're at with the whiteboard. We haven't lost it. We're keeping track of it, and we'll continue to do our annual housekeeping code amendments, and through that we have whittled down a few things from that list as part of that annual updates.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just hoping to clarify my assumption of where it was at. And sometimes we even say, oh, we should add this to the whiteboard, so it keeps growing as well. Lots of good work for us to work on in the future. One final question from the PPC hearing. There was a motion that wasn't carried around massing and facade design requirements. And I'm not sure if I followed it didn't pass, so it's not before us today, but I was just wondering if you could expand on kind of what the intent of that motion was, if you recall.
The intent was to not apply the design standards that are currently applied to Old Town citywide. I think there was concern that we needed to have a better understanding of if we were to apply those standards, the implications. And so the rest of the commissioners didn't quite agree, and they felt that the two design standards that were being proposed were appropriate because it's addressing facade modulation, and then also what we call blank wall treatment. So basically ensuring that the structure isn't just a plain blank wall. The requirements would allow a developer to choose from, I think, 4 different types, from changing building color or adding windows or some kind of modulation, again, just to give it visual interest.
And all of that would still apply to whatever the fourth affordable smaller unit would be. It would still have the same kind of design aesthetic as the remaining units, right?
Yeah, so this requirement would be applied to single family as well as middle housing.
All right, any other questions, committee? All right, well, very good. Then we're going to move into public comment again for this particular item. Thank you, Valerie. If there's anyone in the room, actually, let me just check in. Is there anyone online at the moment?
No, Chair, there is nobody online.
Okay, great. Is there anyone in the room who'd like to make public comment now? Yeah, come on up.
Good evening. My name is Nancy Davidson. I'm a resident of Old Town, 405 Southeast Bush. I'm also a former resident of Squaw Mountain. I first of all wanted to express my appreciation for the hard work that the PPC did on this issue. They listened very carefully. There were a lot of comments provided by community members and citizens and residents who were very concerned about potential proposals and the impacts to the character of the community. I very much appreciated they moved forward with the recommendation to do 2 units per lot, except for those in areas that are affected by major transit stops, which we're all aware of. I think the idea of making ADUs more easy to construct is a great way to address public housing, making places that are more home-like for residents to rent or to own. The allowance of 2 ADUs with another unit or duplex is also very informative, and we see several of those in the Old Town neighborhood at this time. And also I appreciate the massing, basically making the Old Town standards part of the community so that we don't have blank walls as we see on a few units in the community. They also expressed a recommendation to move forward by the council and the administration to try and address the definition of this major transit stop, which I think is a very good thing, and hopefully this piece of legislation that Minnie referenced will help and improve this thing. We did provide lots of public comments and in terms of written correspondence, and I've brought copies in case you have not seen them, and I'd like them entered into the record from many of the people that I actually obtained copies of. So I'll provide those. If there is an interest on behalf of the council to make the 4 units per parcel go throughout the community, I know there are some people that are interested in that, and I've heard that from some of my neighbors as well. I think there's several issues that need to be considered. Parking, of course, 4 units, potentially 8 vehicles per household, or 2 units per unit, 8 units, 8 vehicles now being added to a community or a street is a pretty challenging thing. The second thing is, of course, it will change the character even with the Old Town standards and stuff. It's higher density. It's something that you're seeing going in Seattle, Kirkland, Bellevue, and it's something to pay attention. The other thing to consider is stormwater. In Old Town, there's lots of neighborhoods without stormwater facilities. Clearly, it will be very difficult for anyone putting in 2 or 4 units to address that. I appreciate that we're not requiring them all to come up to those standards, but it will provide more potential impervious area, and it's something to be concerned about. And the other thing that I'm really concerned about is the tree canopy. And you build more density, trees are going to come down. We have a canopy standard identified in the climate commitment, and it's something that we should be paying attention to. So if we're going to 4 units, it's something that we really need to think about. With that, I really appreciate the opportunity to provide comments and look forward to your decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to provide public comment this evening? Yeah, come on up.
So, I live on Squaw, and I have lots of friends in Sycamore, and these are all places that would be just about impossible to figure out how to do 2, much less 4. And for example, Forest Rim is not does not have a homeowners association, and that is a magnificent distance up the hill, and we don't have water redundancy up on the hill. So when you start, and same with Sycamore, you have upper and you have lower Sycamore. So when you start looking at the reaches of the elevation changes for these extra densities that would be possible, it's expensive. And so what the state has not required for the 2 units, it's the environmental review. If you decide you wanted to go above that, then you're gonna have to describe what those consequences are for anything above what the state has required, because it is no longer a requirement, it's optional. The other thing that is hard to make decisions in absentia is all the parking stuff. They've pulled the parking into a whole different category. And so some of the things that are in the parking are, you can take down more trees. If you can't build your units because it's too expensive. So that means you would be potentially taking down trees and planting them off-site. We haven't even figured that out for our regular code change, much less adding even more of that into this. So I think really it's time to just go with the 2, you do the minimum you possibly can, and then you try to figure out what the language is, with again, more language coming your way, including, I think, mobile units being able to be parked in people's driveways as one of those things that's still on the board. So now, how many units does that count for in one area? It's everything's moving too fast to try to go faster. So I appreciated PPC staying with 2 and all of the public that came out to talk. Squawk and Sycamore, they're tough because, you know, they're less organized. But anyway, everybody I've talked to, they're still oblivious to the whole thing even happening. So the outreach didn't reach terribly far, but where it did reach, you can get the opinion. Thanks.
Thank you, Connie. Anyone else in the room like to make public comment before we deliberate? Going once, going twice. Anyone checking back in? Anyone online? All right. Then I think we're going to move on to council deliberation. The direction needed slide. Would you mind throwing that back up for us? And then we'll open it up for feedback. Would you like to start?
Okay. Just, yeah, give some recommendations. I think we can do that, kind of part of the job. Gosh, well, first of all, I was going to start with my thank yous on this. And I'll start with Valerie because it's her birthday. And because that's dedication to come in. I mean, we should thank you anyway for all of the work that you've done, including tours of this and answering all kinds of email questions, and just the dedication of getting it right and the little tweaks. But I also want to express that thanks to PPC and the community's involvement in the work. As much as this is state required, the feedback allows us to make it a little bit more Issaquah centric. And we've seen that in things like the critical areas and protecting those and such. So I've written a few things here because I think this is an important element of what we're doing here. I recognize that change, especially around one's home, is pretty sensitive, and nobody wants to see their neighborhood suddenly changed beyond recognition. But I do think we have a really great example in our community of how zoning changes can actually create gentle density that the community loves and that doesn't happen quickly, and that's Old Town. Because Old Town has single-family duplex as its zoning and has for a long time, and it still retains a majority of the housing as single-family. And so I think it's just really important that even though you guys are getting letters asking for purchase, they're your home, and people aren't going to sell all at once because of this. Our analysis is expecting that only 5% of our growth by 2044 is going to be from this type of infill change, middle housing development. And yes, it will impact Squawk and Old Town more than others, and I wish I could wave a magic wand and make that go away and make CCNRs and HOAs not have the protective covenants that they have, but we can't. And then I wanted to talk to the 4 units compared to 2 units. So I appreciate that we made that ask to PPC, both because the question hadn't been asked, and I think it's important to provide options and get the feedback, which you can only do if the question is asked. And then also the initial data that we were looking at, it was really uncertain if allowing 2 units would result in just fewer, more expensive luxury homes, which doesn't really meet our goals. And so that's why I appreciate we also asked the question about, is that 4th unit feasible with the affordable requirement? And I think that's really important, because if we just say, oh, we could get all of these affordable units out of this, but based on our code and the pro forma we're showing, it's not really buildable or pencils out, then we're kind of making a promise to the community that, oh, if you deal with, some additional gentle density, we'll also get affordable units, but that might not have been able to be built. So I appreciate that we looked at it, we recognized what would need to happen in order to allow those built. So all of that, based on what I've heard from PPC and the community, I agree with the feedback that 2 homes per lot is the right fit for Issaquah, and that we make the change in code that, allows for that smaller affordable unit, just to really cement that as an option. And the third piece that I really agree with PPC is that the definition of a major transit stop is absolute bogus, the way that the state has defined it right now. So I think unless we have a commitment from transit partners to continue service at a station area with regularity, defining movable bus stops that don't have BRT lanes or transit centers or light rail stations or something built that shows that commitment is just wrong. So I appreciate mentioning the House Bill 1491. I did notice that they have a hearing on the 4th at 1:30 p.m., which I have now signed up for so that we can speak on that, because I think that is really important. And I did read over the documentation. It would fix this problem. So I suggest everybody sign up. But in general, I'm really pleased with this process, the listening that we have done and the thoughtful conversations, other than that smack that the state put down that just doesn't make it very fun. So that's where I sit on it. Thank you.
Really similar. Definitely a big thank you to the community. I went back and watched the different PPC meetings ever since our last PDE touch. So thank you to PPC and staff, of course, for carrying the weight of this for so long. It was like 5 or 6 touches meetings, incredible. And then of course many community faces that look familiar from watching that meeting on YouTube. So thank you very much for taking your time to be here as well. And Valerie, I thought you went question by question very methodically and had good conversations, so well done kind of structuring the touches with PPC. I agree with the recommendations that the groups put together. I think a problem has kind of been defined by the state and a vision has been set at that level. So I think it makes sense to implement the vision as it was crafted there, and then monitor the items that we've kind of identified of interest here, The lot density and affordability issue, it'll just be interesting to see how that plays out on the ground. And also, let me just say thank you for doing the kind of feasibility analysis around that. Is that fourth affordable unit even feasible? And then after that, being creative and saying, okay, well, what would make it feasible? So thank you for kind of tweaking that and finding out what comes next. I just think that's just outstanding staff work in my mind. It's because you could just as easily have come back and said, man, it's not at the size, it's not feasible. And then we could have had a couple more touches of being like, well, what would make it feasible? But you kind of almost anticipated what we in the community might have said, which is what would have made that feasible. So anyways, I was really impressed by that work. The ADU size, kind of watching how that continues to show up on the ground too, because we still have every now and then public commenters around wanting to have a little bit more space for particular use cases, right? Impact fees will probably be something we'll need to evaluate in the future, both for single family and middle housing, and just trying to better understand what the impact of not having that is. I know there are many other opportunities around, could we be using like IHIP funding, some of our housing investing pool to support affordable units and things like that too. So I look forward to maybe framing up some of these conversations in the future. And then of course, frontage improvements, which is kind of what I had brought up last time. And I agree again with the direction of still exempting that for middle housing, but I did want to put that just on the radar because the mayor and I actually went on a little frontage improvement tour a few weeks ago. We got in her car and we drove around Old Town and Squawk and Newport, some of the single family neighborhoods in Newport too, and just kind of observed the variety of frontages and paths that we saw. And it really doesn't necessarily seem unreasonable to say in the future, maybe after we have a broader conversation, that we could match existing standards of frontage, right? There's a variety. There's curb and gutter sidewalks, which obviously cost the most, right? There's kind of non-conforming smaller sidewalks with cracks and stuff. And then there are gravel paths and there's a lot of other uses, right? So is there a way in the future where we could say, as infills coming in, you need to match the existing frontage use in order to promote mobility and walkability in a neighborhood, in order to promote sense of safety, so you're not kind of, when a car is parked in that gravel path, going around it and walking in the street as cars are coming by, and things like that. But again, I think it makes sense to hold off on that and have a broader conversation, because as you alluded to, there is a lot going on in the street standards universe right now here at the city, and mobility and infrastructure. And of course, I just left that committee, so I know we were having those conversations when I left to come here. Is very similar to this conversation around frontage improvements. It's so similar. So I see kind of benefit in kind of pairing that conversation in the future as well. Because the street standards was all about like just acknowledging that it's not really feasible. We don't have the means to create, curb and gutter sidewalk facility everywhere where we want to, right? Plus, I think waiting on that sense makes sense because we're going to have even more data from the community survey coming up this year. And to your point that you've made earlier too, I mean, we've got to get the middle housing stuff done by, early June coming up, right? So let's do what we need to do and then monitor some of these things of interest and come back as needed in the future. So, and also thank you for 1491 for that House bill. I just looked it up on ledge.wa.gov as well and saw that there was a hearing and it had good support from Victoria and other legislators in the House when it was in the House. So I will also be sure to write our legislators, and maybe that's something even we share with the rest of the council as well. And then two things I just wanted to note from the community that I heard that I thought would be a good idea to revisit in the future too. The EV parking and what's the impact of kind of our EV ordinance from 2021 and how we're applying that to kind of the context today. And then also being mindful of tree code implementation and I know this committee, not next month, but the month after, I think we're talking about tree code, so we can make sure to bring that up as well. So anyways, excellent work, and I think we go forward with the PPC recommendations. It sounds the same here. Do we need a vote, or does the administration have what they need in terms of feedback?
We have what we need. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Anything else you want to add? You're good. All right, then with that, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is COM 0105, 2025 Title 18 clarifying amendments with our very own principal planner, Kristen Leeson. And we'll let you get set up, but feel free to get started when you're ready.
All right, sorry it took me a minute. Hi, I'm Kristen Leeson, Principal Planner. Let me get back to the beginning here. Let's see. It seems I went through it. So, here to talk about Title 18 2025 clarifying amendments tonight. There are two questions we have for you. Are the proposed amendments clear, or do they need more clarity? And does the committee recommend the amendments as proposed? Sorry. So a little background, as you know, in 2023, we had some,
We're not laughing at you. It's just the mysterious gray box.
Okay.
It always
Oh.
shows up. I don't know why.
it's on my computer. It's a weird gray box. Is that better?
Oh, that's much better.
Okay, you're welcome. As you know, in 2023, we finished an overhaul of Title 18. And when you have several people completely overhauling a 450-page document, there are bound to be a few things that are missed, mistyped, left out, that kind of thing. So as we continue to work through the plan, on projects that come through, we note down things in order to fix it. So we, work on our quality control and best practices and trying to make sure it's right. So we keep a list of amendments on an Excel spreadsheet, and we have broken them up into clarifying amendments and policy amendments. And the clarifying amendments are that they are simply corrections, or something wasn't worded right, or you think, this isn't lined up right, that kind of thing. So that's what we're talking about tonight. I will note that in June or July, we are coming back with policy amendments for you all to look at, but that's a different time. So, just kidding. There we go. So I'm just going to run through these. So our first one is application completeness. Our code currently says that this section applies to all applications to all projects. That is not the case. This is the land use code. So it applies to all land use applications. So that's the first correction. In the next one, there were two issues that took place. We have at the very top residential, commercial, and intensive commercial or something like that. We had multifamily was under commercial, so we just moved it over to residential. And another one was that warehouses in the past were permitted in urban core, intensive commercial, and intensive commercial central Issaquah. They were omitted, so we've replaced those uses. Form and intensity, Old Town multifamily densities. Oh, as part of the Title 18 update, we sort of had multifamily high and multifamily medium overlays kind of in Old Town, and we were asked to make those separate zones, but they have slightly different heights and impervious surface and such, but it was lined up incorrectly in the form and intensity table, so we just corrected that. There was also an incorrect reference to the adjusted building height section, so we fixed the reference. Floor area ratio, we have a base height and we have a maximum height, and applicants were a bit confused by that, anybody who called, so we just added verbiage in there explaining what the two were. Applicants come in and they want to do adult family homes or daycare centers or family daycare centers, two different things. And we don't want to issue permits unless we are certain that they have been certified by the state first and have business permits from the state, business licenses from the state. It didn't say that on our code, so now, whoops, we're proposing that it does. Uh-oh, you want me just to move on? Or, okay. Not on my computer, it said it had to restart, it's dark. So I can't move forward. I can keep talking. Okay, I can't stop sharing my screen. I mean, it's black.
All right, bear with us a moment while we work on some technical difficulties.
Oh, wait, let's see. It just came back on. Oh, okay. Never mind.
All right.
I'm gonna use minis.
Okay.
Oh, that would be good. Thank you. One more. There we go. I did that one. Landscaping. We didn't have any clarity, planners did not have any clarity on when landscape plans were required. So we added thresholds to the applicability section. We also clarified when, not just what it used to state in the bonding section what is in bonds, and we just now say when they're required and why. Okay, next page. Planting strips. There was inconsistency in public right-of-way planting strips that we had. One said 4 feet, one said 5 feet. So we made those consistent between the two. We made them 5 feet. Outdoor lighting, we made it clear that the standards do not apply to existing single-family structures. We also took out, there was something that said, these are exempt unless required by state and federal law. And then the first exemption was those things required by state and federal law. So we took that out, clarified that. Old Town, there was a section that said that the Old Town design standards applied to CBD and multifamily, but that was being interpreted as multifamily throughout Old Town, and it's meant to be cultural and business district, multifamily, medium, Old Town, and multifamily high east of Sunset. So we just made that clarification. The central Issaquah standards, we actually changed the boundary in 2018, but that had never been corrected before, so we corrected it to match our changes from that. Next page, please. Talus development standards. They are any applications that come through for Talus are required to be approved by the Talus Architectural Review Committee first. It used to be in the old code. It was left out. We put it back in this code. SEPA policies. There are a list of names that SEPA applies to. Some of those of plans, functional plans, some of those names had changed, so we made those corrections. And lastly, critical area regulations. We updated the state model language with language applies directly to Issaquah. We updated the classification table, and we updated the CARA map to represent the new level 4 boundary for CARA. I should note that we took out, there was a proposed amendment for, oh my goodness. Pardon me? No, we already took that one out before the public hearing. It was for signs. We added a definition of temporary signs. Thanks to public comment, we are going to revisit that one because what we were doing wasn't really meeting the intent of what needed to be done. So we're going to revisit that and bring it back with the policy amendments. I noted that on the matrix that was sent out. Next slide. So our next step is that April 21st, this would go for council action. And as I mentioned earlier, we will also be bringing policy amendments back to you in June and July. Next slide. So then our proposed motion is the administration recommends approval of the 2025 Title 18 clarifying amendments as presented.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
very
you.
much. Yeah.
Sorry about all the complications.
That's okay. It makes the meeting more interesting. Any questions? No? I don't have any questions either. So I will go on to public comment then. Any public comment in the audience for clarifying amendments to Title 18?
During Title 18, there was a lot of conversation about whether the lighting standards should be for single-family housing, and the city swore they should be. So I guess I didn't notice that they were taking it out again. And so I'm wondering why, unless I'm not understanding what the presentation was, I'm wondering why that change was made. Even though I agree with it, I don't think it ever should have been on the single-family housing, but I argued so much for it. Now I want to know why I was right. If indeed we're talking about the same thing.
Thank you, Connie. Anyone else? David, I'm looking at you. Would you like to make any public comment? Is there anyone online?
No, Chair, there is not.
No one online. All right, then we'll move on, unless you don't. Do you want to make any public comment? Or are you okay? Yeah. All right, then we'll move on to the deliberation, which is just, do we agree with the direction of the clarifying amendments? Is that correct? Oh, clarity, and proceeding to the next meeting. All right. Open up for deliberations. We're good to go.
Yeah, I guess I would say thanks for doing the review and catching things. It's kind of the minimum requirement of making big changes, but I'll pat ourselves on the back for doing so. And I think this can probably go on consent, would be my feedback. That's about all I have.
Yeah, pretty similar. I mean, very straightforward. I mean, even PPC said very straightforward. So I agree, very straightforward. We did say we were going to do this when we overhauled Title 18, right? We would, as users come in, as staff who are users are using the code, we'll identify areas, and we're doing what we're saying. So this is great. And you know, of course, as committee and as policymakers, we're very eager to get into the policy amendments, as you could imagine, but it is still very good to move the needle on some of these clarifying things, make it easier to use for users and things like that. Yeah, consent, I could see that. I was actually gonna say, let's put it on regular business, because it does seem like there's this movement among the administration to put more things on regular business, but also this could be our way of saying, by the way, Title 18's not gone and policy amendments are coming back, council, so get ready, or something like that. But I'm just curious if staff has any thoughts on where to place it. Do you have any strong opinions?
The administration feels that these are just cleanup amendments, and there's not a lot of policy discussion there that we didn't have in the original Title 18 process. And so we'd recommend putting it on consent.
Well, and I guess I can, during my report out of the committee, I could also just tease that policy amendments are coming as well. Okay. Yeah, I'm good with that. Anything else from you? All right. Well, thank you very much, Kristen, and thank you for all the staff who worked on this. That closes out our last regular business item of the meeting. So the next item is announcements. Do you have any announcements?
Substitute House Bill 1491 has a remote hearing at 1:30 p.m. on the 4th, and people can sign up. There you go.
And I'll also just say that our next meeting is scheduled for May 6th, and the preliminary agenda includes COM 0108 2025 Title 18 policy amendments and COM 0124 capital improvement plan. It's that time of year. So there being no further business, we are adjourned at 7:45 p.m.